Yo, what is going on? It is I, Big J, all day, aka the mighty Big J. Welcome to another episode of The Hype Show. If you are new to the channel, please make sure to like and comment on this video and subscribe to the channel as well. And if you're not new, thank you again for joining me for another episode. I appreciate it. Happy Sunday to you. We're going to start out with giving you an update on the game that's currently going on right now in the NFL over in Frankfurt, Germany. That's where we're going to start, and then we're going to go through the rest. We're going to go through the Thursday night results of the game between the Carolina Panthers and the Chicago Bears. Then we're going to go through the rest of the Sunday schedule and talk about the games and preview what's going to be played today, and also give you my prediction on who I think is going to win, and also prognosticate each team's schedule going a few weeks out. That's typically what I do for each team. And then we're also going to list the bye teams that aren't playing this week. There's 4 of them. And we're also going to go over the Sunday night football matchup here that's taking place later on as the Jets travel to Las Vegas to take on the Raiders, the New York Jets. And then we're also going to discuss the Monday night football game to wrap things up, and that's the Denver Broncos traveling to visit the Buffalo Bills tomorrow night, Monday, November 13th at 8:15 p.m. Eastern on ABC and ESPN. All right, as I said, we're going to start with going over the results and currently give you an update of who's playing right now. The Indianapolis Colts and New England Patriots are playing in Frankfurt, Germany right now. And as we speak, that game, there's 7 minutes, 45 seconds left in the fourth quarter, and the Colts lead this game by a score of 10-6. This game started at 9:30 a.m. Eastern, so you still have time to catch the last bit of it if you have the NFL Network. It's going on right now on that station. I believe this is the last of the games that the NFL is playing overseas. They played a few games in London, and then they had 2 games in Germany. There was a game last week between the Chiefs and the Dolphins. They played last week in Germany, with the Chiefs winning that one 21-14. The Chiefs and Dolphins, ironically, are 2 of the 4 teams that are on a bye week this week that don't play. So those are 2 of the teams that you won't be talking about this week as far as their schedule. We'll be discussing those more on Tuesday and going into next week. But yeah, the Chiefs and Dolphins are 2 of the teams that don't play this week. As I stated, the score is 10-6 Indianapolis Colts, and I'll keep you posted and give you a final before this broadcast is completed here. As far as my prediction, I went with the Indianapolis Colts because I said the Patriots, as I said, they're 2-7 going in this game, and they're just not a very good football team. The Colts are kind of up and down. They've had some injuries and they've lost some key guys, but they still play great football despite that. And they just work with what they have. That's why they're a 4-5 football team. So, excuse me. Again, 6:53 left to go in the fourth quarter, and the Colts lead that game 10-6. The first game we're going to talk about here, as far as the schedule here, these games that I'm going to talk about, the next 7 games that we're going to discuss here, all these games are taking place. I'm sorry, 6 games. There's only 6 games. They're all taking place at 1 p.m. Eastern. Those are the games that we're going to discuss. But first, we need to get into the Thursday night football game here. That was the Carolina Panthers traveling to take on the Chicago Bears. And the final for that game was Chicago getting the win 16-13 over the Carolina Panthers. It's funny, that game, I kind of predicted that game would go the way it would. And it was kind of funny. I stated that both teams would have a combined total of probably 30 points. And they ended up with 29. So 16-13. That's pretty hilarious. That game kind of pretty much went how I thought it would. And Chicago just was the better team because of the way they paced their offense. They were able to get 133 yards on the ground as a team, compared to Carolina's 43 yards. Their second leading rusher was their quarterback, Bryce Young, with 18 yards. So Miles Sanders, actually, he finished with less rushing yards than me that night. He actually had -5 yards. So I had 5 more yards from on the field than him in the basement of my home. That's pretty funny. The Chicago Bears, as far as they went, Justin Fields, he missed the game again. He still has the dislocated thumb that he's dealing with on his throwing hand, so he missed a 4th game. I kind of expected him to miss this game because they just played on Sunday, and I didn't expect it that quick of a turnaround within a 4-day period, so I knew he would miss that game. Tyson Bagent was 20 of 33. 162 yards passing. He didn't have any touchdowns. He didn't have any interceptions either. They didn't have any turnovers as a whole for the team. So that was their first game all season where they didn't have any turnovers on any part of the football. So that's terrific. Deontay Foreman was the leading carrier for Chicago. He had 21 carries for 80 yards and a touchdown. It was an 11-yard run to get that in the second quarter. Roschon Johnson followed him up with 5 carries for 18 yards. As I said, as a team, Carolina, they only ran for 43 yards as a team. Chuba Hubbard led the way with 9 carries for 23 yards. Bryce Young, he had another very pedestrian game. He was 21 of 38 for 185 yards. He didn't throw any touchdowns, but he didn't have any interceptions either. So both quarterbacks played pretty safe football, is what I would say. And that's kind of explains how the score was. There wasn't very many passes down the field. There was only a couple to speak of. And to be honest with you, that was kind of the reason why the game went the way it went. There wasn't a lot of chances taken because neither quarterback really wanted to make any mistakes. This game, if you were just a casual football fan, would have been something you would have called boring. But the reason why I think the game went the way it went is simply because of that. The quarterbacks were both young. Tyson Bagent is a rookie, undrafted at a Shepherd University. It's a D2 school. Bryce Young is a rookie as well. He was the number 1 overall pick out of Alabama. So you got 2 young quarterbacks playing here with very little experience to speak of. If you put them together, there's not even a season worth of experience yet for these guys. So it just went the way it went because of that. On the receiving end, however, here there was a little bit more to speak of there. For Chicago, the leading receiver was DJ Moore. He had 5 catches for 58 yards. He didn't find the end zone, however. On 9 targets, he had 5 catches. Also, Cole Kmet, the tight end, he had 5 catches for 45 yards. Darnell Mooney, he had a pretty quiet day on 4 targets. He had 2 catches for 14 yards. On the Carolina side here, Mike Strachan here, he was only targeted twice, but he had 1 catch for 45 yards. It went for 45 yards. That was the only thing he did on the day. It's his 3rd year out of West Virginia, so he was a young receiver that they've kind of had in the mix for a while. He didn't find the end zone, however, and again, he was only targeted twice. Adam Thielen led the team with 10 targets, and that's typically going to be the case. He has 6 catches for 42 yards, but also didn't find the end zone. There were no touchdowns thrown by either quarterback. The only touchdown of the game was the one that was ran in by Deontay Foreman. And for Carolina, they did get a touchdown, but it was on a punt return that occurred by Amir Smith-Marset. And he ran it back for a touchdown here. And that was the only touchdown that Carolina got. There was nothing on offense or defense. So that 79-yard punt return for a touchdown was the only scoring that they managed to get as far as Carolina goes here. Looking forward for each of these teams, like I said, this was a situation where Chicago was in a win-win situation. I spoke about this Thursday and I misworded it, so please allow me to clarify what I meant by that. For Chicago, if this was a situation where they would have lost this game, that would have improved their draft position with Carolina to kind of have a better pick than Carolina. And I say better pick than Carolina because the trade that they made in order to get Bryce Young, Carolina traded away their first round pick to Chicago. So with Chicago beating Carolina, that put Carolina in the number 1 pick, which belongs to Chicago. So the reason why I said it was a win-win situation for Chicago is because if Chicago were to have lost this game, they themselves would have improved their number 1 chances of getting that pick. But with them winning, they still could have improved the chances of that number 1 pick because of because of owning Carolina's number 1 pick, if that makes sense. Because again, the trade that they made to get Bryce Young, they traded away this coming draft's first round pick for the 2024 draft. So as we speak right now, Carolina has the number 1 pick because of the fact that they're 1-8, but that pick goes to Chicago. So Chicago, as a result of their win, has the number 1 pick in the 2024 NFL draft, which is pretty much unheard of because typically winning lowers you down as far as the pick you're going to get. Kind of like the Broncos, for example. They were in a position to have that number 1 pick, but they've reeled off a couple wins lately over the last few weeks. So that's what lowers you down is winning. The Chicago Bears on their own at 3-7 have the 5th pick. Their own first round pick would be the 5th pick. So as it stands right now, based on records, they would have the 1st pick and the 5th pick in the 2024 draft, which is pretty awesome. That means you're going to get a generational player based on who you pick and where you pick, from, and then you get another player that's going to contribute as well. Will they trade one of those picks away? I highly doubt it because with them trading away that number 1 pick this past year, they weren't able to pick anybody until later in the draft, and they're going to need some pieces. So I can see the Bears using both of those picks, but for Carolina, Bryce Young may not have been the guy you wanted because C.J. Stroud, he's having a very solid, if not incredible year because for rookie quarterbacks, he's breaking all the statistics and breaking all the records that were set in place prior. There's not a lot for rookie quarterbacks as far as amazing years that you can speak of. even the great ones struggle right off the bat. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, John Elway, just about any great quarterback you can think of struggled right off the bat before they became a Hall of Fame quarterback. So will Bryce Young become that guy for the Panthers? It remains to be seen, but a lot of the passes that I saw him throw, they were either throws where he had to throw it away because the pocket collapsed on one side of the ball or one side of the pocket, or it was a situation where the receivers just weren't open enough. And Chicago, they aren't an amazing defense, but they have a secondary that can give you problems and kind of keep you honest here, especially with TJ Edwards back there. So again, the Bears improved to 3-7. Let's take a look at their next few games here that they got coming up here. They don't play again for another week. They'll be at Detroit November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. The following week, though, they're on Monday Night Football at the Minnesota Vikings on ABC November 27th. They then have their bye week after that before they host the Detroit Lions again, December 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They'll be then at the Cleveland Browns. The network and time are to be determined, but that game will be taking place December 17th. And then on Christmas Eve, they'll be home against the Arizona Cardinals, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So Chicago, I don't see them winning the Detroit games, but with divisional matchups, things can happen. You see the better team win one, and then you'll see the team that's a lesser team in a sense get one too because they know that team very well. It's like such is the case with the Broncos and Chiefs, for example. They were able to split 1-1 because the Broncos, they see the Chiefs every year. They know how to play them. I myself didn't expect the Broncos to win, but it's not too unexpected because again, with divisional matchups, they know you better and things can happen. So that's kind of what happened with that. And with Chicago, I don't know if they'll beat Detroit at home. At Detroit next week, I don't see them winning that game on the road. But in a few weeks after that, December 10th, they could possibly take that one. Christmas Eve against the Cardinals, since they're hosting that game at Soldier Field, I could see them taking that one as well. Arizona is a dome team and they're traveling east, so that's going to be a bad mix for them, I feel like. And again, Arizona, they don't even have Joshua Dobbs anymore. They'll have Kyler Murray for the foreseeable future back in the mix at quarterback, returning from the ACL injury he suffered last year. But will he be effective and will he have the pieces around him for them to be a solid team? Who knows? I honestly don't see that happening. So I can see the Bears being 2-3 over the course of their next 5 games forecasting. Again, there's a bye week mixed in there to start the month of December, but honestly, looking forward over the next 5 weeks, the Bears could be 2-3. Not sure if Justin Fields will be back again. That two games in 5 days with the Saints game a week ago and with the Cardinals game Carolina just occurring a few days ago. That's 2 games within a 5-day period. So I knew Justin Fields wouldn't be back for that. So again, Justin Fields has now missed 5 games since dislocating that thumb. And it remains to be seen when he'll be back. We'll just have to look at it and see how things look over the week here and see if he'll be available at Detroit. If he's going to be gone until the bye week, that may be better because, like I said, Chicago is not a contender. It's not a situation where they're trying to get a wild card spot or anything like that. That when they got him just improved them to 3-7. Even if Green Bay is going to takes a loss today, they'll still be half a game ahead of Chicago because they've already had their bye week. Chicago hasn't had a bye week yet, so they've played all 10 weeks so far. So Chicago, like I said, 2-3 is what I'm prognosticating over the next 5 weeks. We take things week to week because it's the NFL, but forecasting who they have and what they have and who they're playing against, I'm going to say 2-3 at best. If it's 1-4, that wouldn't shock me much either. On the flip side, Carolina, there's no winning here. The one win you got was a couple of weeks ago now over the Houston Texans by 2 points, and I still don't even understand how they won that because Houston, they've kicked some tail this year, and I could see Houston fighting for a wild card spot towards the end of the year. So how Carolina beat them is beyond me. But they're home against the Dallas Cowboys next week, November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. That's going to be a rodeo for the Cowboys for sure. The Panthers are at Tennessee the following week, November 26th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They're then at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. And they're then at the New Orleans Saints, December 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So, yeah, they have a 3-game road trip after next week. So that's going to be interesting. They're back home against the Atlanta Falcons on December 17th, but the time and network are to be determined. But that divisional matchup will be December 17th against the Falcons. Like I said, Carolina is not going to have an easy time against Dallas because if you can't beat the Bears, you can't beat the Colts, you're not going to do anything against Dallas. Dallas likes to beat up the tomato cans. They like to beat up the teams that are below them. It's the contenders that we're concerned about with Dallas. So I have no doubt Dallas wins this game, barring like unforeseen circumstance such as an injury or just they just wet the bed like they did against Arizona a while back. But I got Dallas winning that one. At Tennessee, I could see Tennessee taking that one too. They think Will Levis is the guy out there in Tennessee at quarterback, so they're probably going to be rolling with him for the rest of the year. They actually announced that they're rolling with him for the rest of the year, and it's going to be rough. At Tampa Bay is a question mark to me. I'll have a prediction for you on that one a few weeks out from now because that's a divisional matchup here. And at Tampa Bay, I'm not going to just take Tampa Bay right off because, again, they started out really well at 3-1, but they've hit a skid really bad. They've lost their last 4 games to fall in 3-5. And we'll talk about Tampa a little bit later today as far as a prediction. But Tampa Bay, hey, I honestly don't know what they are yet. They've lost some games in a row. I thought they started out really well, and Baker Mayfield was having a great debut for them, but it's kind of just not the same anymore for them at this point. At New Orleans is kind of tricky as well with the Saints. So down the road, I'll have predictions for you because they're going to have 3 straight divisional matchups after they play Dallas next week and after they visit Tennessee. So Carolina, they're in their division, they're last place for a reason, and they'll probably continue over those next few weeks. So the Panthers, to me, at best, 1-4. If they steal one of those matchups against a divisional opponent, that could possibly happen. But Dallas and Tennessee look like losses to me for Carolina. Again, I don't even know how they beat Houston. So again, this is a 1-8 football team, and they'll probably finish the season probably at best 4-13. I don't know where those other few wins are coming from, but towards the end of the season, people bench players because they're already in the playoffs and seeding is set, and we'll have to prognosticate week to week as that moment comes and see if that actually happens for them. But like I said, I don't see this team being a contender by any means. Let's look at the score really quick here. Indianapolis is still playing at New England at this point here. I'll give you an update on that score. At this current time here, the Colts still lead the Patriots 10-6 with 1:46 to go in the fourth quarter. But the Patriots have the football at this current point here. It's currently 3rd and 5 at the New England 19. So they're trying to score here, possibly a field goal if needed. They need the touchdown, though, since they're down by 4. So they may take anything they can get, but they need a touchdown if they want to win this football game. So, again, I'll give you a final before we close out this broadcast here. The next game we're going to talk about here taking place here at Paycor Stadium in Cincinnati, Ohio. The Houston Texans are traveling to visit the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are actually favored by 4.5 to win this football game here. And I think that's a pretty interesting margin here if you're a betting person. I'm not a betting person at all. I just like to give those margins out just in case you're trying to observe how you want to bet or do your parlays today. But looking at this game, it's an interesting margin because under normal circumstances, if we were looking at this game early in the season, you would have Cincinnati by 10. Mainly because of how the fact that Texans have a lot of rookies on their team and Cincinnati was a better football team to start last year. They started slow, but they've worked their way back to being 5-3. There's actually a logjam in the AFC North. The Baltimore Ravens lead the division at 7-2, but Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Cincinnati all sit at 5-3. I consider that tied for second. I don't call that last place by any means because if the playoffs were to start today, as they like to say, all of those teams would be in as wild cards. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Cincinnati. They would take all 3 of those wild card spots. They would be in that whole division right now. So that's why I don't sleep on any of those teams. They all got a shot right now. The Baltimore Ravens, we'll talk about them later in the broadcast. Pittsburgh and Cleveland as well. The Baltimore Ravens at 7-2 and Kansas City sitting at 7-2 on a bye week. Based on what Baltimore does, I'll know if they're on the same level as Kansas City or not. Because Kansas City's offense is not quite the same, but their defense is the best it's been since Mahomes has been there. But getting back to Texans and Bengals here, the Bengals by 5.5. They would essentially need a touchdown to do that, a touchdown and a field goal, or a touchdown or 2 field goals, basically to make that margin and get you that win. This is going to be an interesting showdown. I'm very curious to see how C.J. Stroud looks on the road. He's been fantastic all season. And this Texans team, a large part of the reason why they're 4-4 is because of that. But they're 3-1 at home, 1-3 on the road. So that's why I'm curious how he's going to look here today. The Bengals hold serve. They're 3-1 at home. So I'm going to take the Bengals to win, but I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on C.J. Stroud. He's having a fantastic year with 14 touchdowns to just the 1 interception he threw a few weeks back. He's only thrown 1 interception all year. Joe Burrow, he's got the 12 touchdowns and 4 interceptions after a slow start. He looks to be fully back from that calf muscle. What I would love to see is some contribution from Joe Mixon running the football here. He's got 126 carries for 490 yards and 3 touchdowns on the season. But typically, Joe Mixon usually has about 5 touchdowns at this point, possibly 6. He's starting off kind of slow in a sense. Those last few touchdowns have come in their last 2 games. So for them, they need a running game to kind of open up that pass more. And if Burrow connects with Chase as much as he did a few weeks ago against the Arizona Cardinals, that's like a record-breaking day. So I don't know if that'll happen again, but if he continues to connect, they'll have a great day against Houston today. On the flip side here, the Houston Texans here, they're definitely surprising us, and I feel like they also need their running game to contribute as well. Dameon Pierce, he's their leading rusher, but he's inactive today, so they'll be starting Devin Singletary at running back. And Devin Singletary coming over from Buffalo, he's been fair. It's nice to have a 2 running back tandem, but Pierce hasn't had that great of a season, so a lot of their carries have been going to Singletary as a result of that. So there's going to be even more of a workload for Singletary to deal with. But as far as the overall results of the game, I'm going to take the Bengals to win this one. I feel like they will win by a touchdown. Houston will keep it fairly close, but I think Cincinnati gets the win. If Houston wins in Cincinnati, that'll be pretty stunning, and I'll be pretty astonished by that, to be honest with you here. But the Houston Texans, they're on their way. They got the right guys in place. They got the right coach in place with D'Amico Ryans. And even if Houston isn't a wild card team this year, I expect in 2024, 2025, the next couple of years, once they get some more experience under their belt, they'll be a team to watch out for. For sure. I feel like the Texans will be a team to watch out for. They'll be coming. I don't know if it's this year, but they'll be coming for sure. On the Cincinnati Bengals, after today, looking forward to the rest of their schedule coming up here. This Thursday, they're at the Baltimore Ravens on Thursday, so they have a quick turnaround here for Thursday Night Football coming up this week at 8:15 p.m. Eastern on Prime Video. They have 10 days before they host the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's going to be tough. That's their first of 2 matchups with the Steelers this year. That'll be taking place November 26th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They're then at the Jacksonville Jaguars for Monday Night Football, December 4th on ABC. Then 6 days later, they host the Indianapolis Colts. That'll be taking place December 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So, looking at their schedule, things get kind of tough for them. They really do. I know the Bengals have won 4 in a row, and they've won 5 of their last 6 after starting 0-2. But things get kind of rough after this Houston game here. So Cincinnati needs to win this game today because that quick turnaround against Baltimore and then hosting Pittsburgh Steelers, those next 2 games, as I stated in my previous broadcast, those games are going to be tough. I talked about this on Tuesday last week, I believe. The AFC North, those teams are going to beat each other up. I'm going to consistently emphasize that because that division is probably the best division in football, as far as I can see. Looking at the records and looking at how everybody's been so far, that's the toughest division in football. One of those teams is going to make noise, but I'm not just going to assume Baltimore because, like I said, there's 8 games left for them. So anything's possible. They lead the pack right now, but that division is dangerous. So looking at Cincinnati's schedule, if they can go 3-2 over their next 5 games, that would be solid. Because Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Jacksonville even, that's going to be a rough sled before you host the Indianapolis Colts on December 10th. So if you can get one of those divisional matchups and then Jacksonville and Houston, ideally you want to go 4-1 because, again, that division is going to be tight. And if you can get a couple of victories under your belt in that division, that would be needed because so far they're 0-2 in the division. They lost to Cleveland, they lost to Baltimore already. And they haven't played Pittsburgh yet. So who knows if they lose those games too. If you go 0-3 in the division next week, that's terrible news because that makes it a lot harder for you to win that division. So for Cincinnati, it starts today, and then you definitely got to take Thursday very seriously. So Cincinnati, if they can go 3-2 but get the divisional matchups, that'll be huge for them. Week to week things happen, like I always say, but for Cincinnati, that's what they need to do. The Houston Texans, like I said, at 4-4 in their division, the way things are sitting right now, Jacksonville leads the way at 6-2, and we'll see them later on today. Indianapolis is actually sitting at 5-5. Looks like they lost to the Patriots. We'll follow up with that game in a bit here. Houston is 4-4 prior to today's matchup, and the Tennessee Titans are 3-5. As I said, the Titans are rolling with Will Levis at quarterback, so we'll have to see if they make a jump as a result of that, and that jump starts the offense. The Houston Texans are hosting the Arizona Cardinals. They have 3 home games after they visit Cincinnati today. They host the Arizona Cardinals November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They then host the Jacksonville Jaguars November 26th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. And then for the afternoon game on December 3rd, they host the Denver Broncos at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS. The Houston Texans here, I had to start the year, I had them losing a few games that they ended up winning. Like, I didn't have them beating the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they stormed in there and took that, and I didn't have them beating Pittsburgh either. So right off the bat, the Houston Texans are proving people wrong across the board. There's probably people in Houston that didn't believe until now. So for me, again, I have them losing today, but I think they'll beat the Cardinals next week. Even with Kyler Murray in the mix, they have more pieces in play than the Arizona Cardinals do. Cardinals are definitely rebuilding. Everything is new this season. The coaching staff, the players for a while were new. Joshua Dobbs was your quarterback until you traded him a week or so ago. So everything is new in Arizona. With the Houston Texans, everything is new, but everything seems to be more established with the coaching staff, with the players, things of that nature. So give me Houston to win that one over Arizona. Jacksonville is going to be tricky because, like I said, they beat Jacksonville week 3 to start the year, and that was in Jacksonville. So Jacksonville is looking for revenge to take that game back. So that one's going to be a slugfest. The Denver Broncos game is intriguing too, because the Broncos, they've won a couple games, but I want to see how they look tomorrow against Buffalo to kind of know if they're back or if that was just kind of just a small bit of momentum just that they just got amped up on. So Texans and Broncos is kind of a pick 'em, ironically, to me. I'm not going to outright say that the Broncos are better because the Texans have played better football and have a better record right now. At the Jets, that'll be intriguing as well. The Jets, they got their butts kicked last Monday against the Chargers for sure, and they looked good prior to that. So I'll have more of an idea of what the Jets are as we get closer to that team or to that game. But Houston right now has a better quarterback in C.J. Stroud. The future is brighter for Houston as opposed to the Jets with Zach Wilson. Aaron Rodgers is talking like he wants to come back. I don't see him coming back. That's just me, man. I know that they've changed the science of a lot of the health and the way that they do surgery and a lot of things, but an Achilles tendon, you talking about coming back, you're not going to be able to run. I don't know, man. I don't see Aaron Rodgers coming back. He's talking like he wants to be back in a few fortnights, as he said, but I highly doubt he comes back this year. So I can see the Texans winning 2 of their next 5 games for sure, even if they don't beat Cincinnati today. Hosting Denver and hosting Arizona, they could take those two. If they took 2 of 3 at home before they went to the Jets, I could see them being 3-2 over the next 5 weeks. If they're 3-2 over the next 5 weeks, that'll put them at 7-6, just above 500. And depending on what other teams do around the conference and in their division, that'll put them in the wild card mix possibly. So, with Houston, we'll just have to see what they do here. On the next game we're going to talk about here, that the matchup is going to be between the New Orleans Saints traveling to visit the Minnesota Vikings. That game is taking place at US Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. The Saints are actually favored at -3 to win that football game, so essentially a field goal. Joshua Dobbs surprised me last week. The circumstances with the Minnesota Vikings against Atlanta last week, with them getting that win, Jaron Hall, as I stated, he did get the quarterback start for them because Joshua Dobbs had just arrived to the team about 10 days ago, and he was very new to the facility. He didn't even get the chance to practice or really look at the full playbook. So they had him as the backup. But the way that he debuted happened as a result of the rookie quarterback Jaron Hall going down with a concussion. So he had to come in and play, and he was able to get that victory. And Jaron Hall is actually inactive again with that concussion. He wasn't able to break protocol or get out of concussion protocol. So they're actually going to be starting Joshua Dobbs here. With this extra week that they've had, he's been able to absorb more, and he may be even better, especially being at home hosting the Saints. So that's going to be interesting here. They have the Saints favored by 3 to win, but I don't fully trust the Saints like that. If the Vikings can get any kind of running game to help Joshua Dobbs out, I could see them winning this game close. The running game for the Minnesota Vikings has been very disappointing to me. Alexander Madison, he just hasn't gotten it going like I thought he would. And I said to start the season, he would need to step in and fill the void of Dalvin Cook not being there. but he only has 434 yards on the season. Cam Akers was your second leading rusher, but he tore his Achilles tendon last week, and he's gone. You're not going to have him. So the interesting thing about this team is your third leading rusher is your quarterback you just acquired last week. That's not going to work. You need Alexander Madison to really put in work. With Cam Akers' injury, Ty Chandler steps in as the backup running back behind Alexander Madison. He only has 42 rushing yards on the season, so he's going to be your number 2 back. They acquired Cam Akers to kind of spell Alexander Madison and help him out, but you're not going to have him anymore. So you really need that contribution from Madison. This game, it feels very much like a toss-up with the Saints getting that -3. As far as a prediction, wow. There's probably a reason why they want to take the Saints to win this football game, and because of the fact that everything is more consistent. But if Joshua Dobbs can surprise that team again, that would be very needed for Minnesota. I'm going to go ahead and actually take the Saints. I'm going to officially take the Saints because the Saints have a better defense than Atlanta did last week. Atlanta's defense, you have a couple of guys like a A.J. Terrell at corner. They brought in Jesse Bates the third over from the Cincinnati Bengals. He plays safety. He played really well, but they just have a couple of guys here and there. Their defense as a whole is not as good as the Saints. The Saints got a better defense, especially with Cam Jordan up there on that front seven. So give me the Saints. I'm going to take the Saints to officially win the game today. Give me the Saints. I'm going to take the Saints on that one. I'm going to take them close. I don't see it being a blowout because Minnesota's going to keep things interesting. I'm looking ahead for the Saints. They actually have a bye week after their game here against Minnesota today. They're back on the road the following week, November 26th, to take on the Atlanta Falcons, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they have 3 straight home games after that. They host the Detroit Lions December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They host the Carolina Panthers December 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. And then December 17th, they host the New York Giants, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. The Giants. Ooh, Lord, that's going to be a whooping. The Giants are probably going to be in the top 5 picking for a draft in the 2024 draft as well because they lost Daniel Jones last week to an ACL tear. And Tyrod Taylor, he's on the IR list as well with the rib issues he's having. So they're starting Tommy DeVito for the foreseeable future. And Tommy DeVito, they keep calling this guy Danny DeVito because they know so little about him. It's pretty bad. So that game is 5 weeks away for the Saints, 5-6 weeks away, but I could see them still winning that one, and that's how bad the Giants are. As far as today with the Saints, I'm going to take them, unfortunately, to lose this game. They beat the Indianapolis Colts a couple weeks ago in Indy, and they played fantastic. And they got a victory last week over the Bears by 7, but for some reason, after the Minnesota game today and after the bye week, I'm kind of confused as to how the Saints are going to be looking here. So, yeah, I'm taking the Saints to win at Minnesota today. To clarify, I apologize. But after the bye week, they're probably going to go 3-1 looking at the way the schedule looks. Looking at the schedule and the way it looks, they should go 3-1 with that loss to possibly Detroit. But Atlanta and Carolina are divisional matchups. That's why I'm very, very cautious as to picking those games because with divisional matchups, it can be very tricky. It's easy to get up for teams that you know and you see twice a year versus other teams. You still may have film on them, but you don't know them as well because you may only see them once every other year, once every 4 years, depending on who they are. So I'm very, very, very cautious about the Atlanta and Carolina games here. And with Detroit squeezed in the middle, that could be a loss as well. So the Saints over the next 5 weeks, I'm looking at 2-3, 3-2. And it's really going to depend on if they can pick up one of those divisional matchups. Taking both would be ideal in the NFC South because, again, Carolina is the only team that I see out of it. With New Orleans, Tampa, and Atlanta, they're all within a couple of games of each other still. So got to separate yourself from the pack somehow. So with the Saints, I can see them being 3-2 over the next 5 weeks at best here. If they can get 4-1, that would be ideal. The Minnesota Vikings here, after this week, they're at the Denver Broncos actually for Sunday Night Football, November 19th on NBC. That's 8:20 p.m. Eastern. The NFL came out and confirmed that they're not flexing that Broncos-Vikings game. They're going to keep it in place. So the Broncos will be hosting Sunday Night Football next week. So after their Monday Night Football matchup, they'll be having Sunday Night Football as well. So they're keeping that game in place here. The Vikings after that will be home against the Chicago Bears for Monday Night Football. That's taking place on November 27th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern on ABC. They have a bye week after that. Then they have 2 road games following that. They'll be at the Las Vegas Raiders December 10th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they'll be at the Cincinnati Bengals December 17th. The time and network are to be determined. Excuse me. So again, looking back at the Minnesota Vikings here, I'm taking the Saints to win close because of their defense. If Minnesota gets a win today, that'll be pretty awesome. That'll probably be a nice way to start the era, the post Kirk Cousins era. Will Kirk Cousins be back? Between being a free agent and the Achilles, the probability are leaning towards no. Again, we'll have to see because Kirk Cousins was playing pretty solid football till that injury came. But Dobbs has been a nice addition. Joshua Dobbs has kind of given them a spark already, and he doesn't even absorb the offense yet. So as the season progresses, he's actually probably going to get better, barring injury. So next week at Denver, Denver's defense to me stepped up last week or 2 weeks now against Kansas City. That was 2 weeks ago now. So if Denver's offense can continue to play pretty solid football and they can get defensive contributions, I can see them taking that game against Minnesota. But Denver, to me, I want to see what they look like against the Bills tomorrow before we go that far. Minnesota home against Chicago for Monday Night Football. I could see them winning that one, especially being at home. Heading into a bye week is nice because that gives Joshua Dobbs that much more time to absorb the offense before you head into that home stretch with 5 more games after that. And at Las Vegas and at Cincinnati, those road games are always going to be tough. But with the Raiders, I could see Minnesota having a difficult time now because, as I said, with the Raiders, they just look like a different team right off the bat without having Josh McDaniels there. They really didn't like that guy, and there's reports that have even come out from the Raiders sources here that there was a team meeting that happened just the week prior to Josh McDaniels being fired, and a lot of the players just ripped into him, basically just saying that he wasn't very relatable and just saying that he didn't have any kind of direct correlation with anybody on the team. And when Josh McDaniels actually asked his then linebackers coach Antonio Pierce to speak on their behalf, he used the '07 Giants as a reference point. And for those of you that remember, Josh McDaniels was the offensive coordinator for that '07 Patriots team that lost the Super Bowl. They won every game leading up to the Super Bowl, but lost that Super Bowl to the New York Giants. That was Super Bowl 46, I believe. I'd have to go back and look, but yeah, that's a tough thing for him to probably talk about, and that probably hurt him right here in the chest. And they said a lot of time Josh McDaniels just seemed disconnected after that meeting. So his departure was probably needed for that Raiders team, and it's going to create a new culture. So the way I felt about the Raiders, just to sum it all up, is a lot different than how I felt at the beginning of the season. So Minnesota, the team we're talking about as far as their schedule at the Las Vegas Raiders, is going to be a pretty interesting game. And I'll have an official prediction for that game and for Cincinnati the following week at Cincinnati. But to sum it all up, the Vikings to me could go probably 2-3 over their next 5 weeks too. The Denver game is going to be interesting, and then Chicago after that will be interesting as well because I got them winning that game in Chicago. But Denver, I want to see how they look before we give a prediction about Sunday Night Football next week here. Going back to the scores here, the Colts Patriots game has gone final. That game has been completed. Let's look at the final score for that here. The final was the Colts getting the victory 10-6. So that score did hold up. The final was 10-6. The Patriots were unable to score that final drive they had. So the Patriots fall to 2-8. The Colts improved to 5-5. So yeah, I had the Colts winning this one close, and that's pretty much what happened here. There was no scoring in the second or third quarter. So if you got up early to watch this game, I feel bad for you. This wasn't really one that was worth it. A lot of the other games that came on early in the year that were international games were a lot more exciting than this one. Like Chiefs and Patriots, that was exciting because the Chiefs were up 21-0 at the half last week, and the Patriots were able to. The Dolphins were able to get a couple of points in the third quarter to kind of make it interesting, get a couple of touchdowns. So this game just kind of just held up and was what it was here. So. Again, the final, the Indianapolis Colts win by a score of 10-6 over the Patriots, dropping the Patriots to 2-8. Colts improved to 5-5, and each team has a bye week next week, so neither team plays in week 11. Going back to the schedule for the rest of the day here today, the next game we're going to discuss is the Green Bay Packers traveling to visit the Pittsburgh Steelers. Packers are at 3-5. The Steelers are at 5-3. That game is taking place at Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh, PA. Pittsburgh is favored by 3 points to win this football game here. I would pick the Pittsburgh Steelers to win by a little more, but I think it's because it's going to be a low-scoring affair. The Green Bay Packers offense is not clicking and moving very well. And with that and the Steelers defense being what it is, I think that the Packers don't even score any more than 17 points. I would be surprised if the Packers score 20 and up in this game, to be honest with you. The problem with that is that the Steelers don't really score 20 and up. So the key is going to be the offense. Kenny Pickett only has 6 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. He has pretty pedestrian numbers. And even compared to Jordan Love with 12 touchdowns and 8 interceptions here, he needs to pick it up a bit. I mean, Kenny Pickett hasn't turned over the football as much, but at the same time, there's just not enough down the field. Their leading receiver, George Pickens, he has 30 catches for 521 yards and 3 touchdowns. And he was actually somewhat vocal about his involvement in the offense last week against the Tennessee Titans. They did get the win, but he was still upset about what he wasn't able to get on Thursday Night Football last week. So I think for me, Pittsburgh today, in order for them to get the win, they got to run the football well with Harris and with Jaylen Warren. Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren each performed pretty well last week against the Tennessee Titans, but they're going to need more from them to spell Kenny Pickett. On the flip side, the Packers had lost 4 games in a row before they defeated the Rams last week, 20-3. So it was nice for them to get back on the winning side of football. But the Green Bay Packers, to me, they still got some work to do. I'm going to take the Steelers to win this football game. I'm going to take the points as well. The Steelers, to me, or the Packers, to me, they got some work to do on that offensive side of the football. Jordan Love's numbers pop out a little more than Kenny Pickett, but I still feel like he needs to work on connecting with his receivers because he's had games where he's thrown a few interceptions. And they're also going to be missing Jair Alexander again on defense and Quay Walker as well with the growing issue. So you're going to be missing a couple of key guys on the defensive side of the football, so you have to perform well on offense if you're the Packers. I'm, again, taking the Steelers to win this football game here today, and I'll take them by like 4 points. They'll win this game pretty closely. The Steelers head to the road to face the Cleveland Browns November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS November 19th. They're then at the Cincinnati Bengals November 26th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They then host the Arizona Cardinals at 1 p.m. Eastern December 3rd on CBS before hosting the New England Patriots for Thursday Night Football that same week, December 7th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern on Amazon Prime. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, including today, their next 5 weeks, I got them winning today. Their matchups against Cleveland and Cincinnati are going to be slugfest. I've already stated this, and I'm going to continue to. The AFC North is the best division in football right now with the way the teams are set up. And if Pittsburgh wants to separate themselves in any kind of way, they got to get these wins. They're tied with Cleveland and Cincinnati as we speak right now. That'll obviously change after today, but if Pittsburgh wants to get themselves in the prime spot, they got to win one of those 2 matchups. If they lose both Cleveland and Cincinnati, they'll be in trouble for sure. But Arizona and New England are wins. They'll win both of those games that week. Pittsburgh, like I said, as I just stated, New England is 2-8 now after they lost to Indy today. New England is not a good team. So Pittsburgh will probably win those 2 games to start December against Arizona and New England, and they'll win today. So I see them at 3-2, but if they want to put themselves in a prime position, they'll want to go 4-1 over the next 5 weeks. They want to go 4-1 over the next 5 weeks if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that starts with getting more out of your offense. The Green Bay Packers, as far as their scheduling today here, they host the Los Angeles Chargers next week, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox, November 19th. Thanksgiving, which is a week from Thursday, 12 days away, they're at the Detroit Lions to kick off that Thanksgiving Day schedule. There's 3 games that day. 10 days later, they're hosting the Kansas City Chiefs December 3rd for Sunday Night Football on NBC. Then they're at the New York Giants for Monday Night Football, December the 11th on ABC, 8:15 p.m. Eastern. So the Packers, looking at their schedule today, they could possibly go 2-3, maybe. They could end up 1-4. The Chargers game that I'm looking at a week from today and the Giants game in December are the possible wins. The Chargers are not, I don't have the Chargers solidified as a great team yet, but they do beat up on teams that are lesser than them, such as the Bears a couple weeks ago. So the Chargers could take that game against the Packers, even though the Packers are hosting them. So We'll just have to see what happens this week with each of those teams here. But I don't see Green Bay beating Detroit or Kansas City those following weeks after that. The Giants are a bad team. The Packers have their problems, but they're not as bad as the Giants. So they'll beat the Giants. So including today, I can see the Packers being 2-3 at best. If they can improve that and be better, that'll kind of keep them in the mix. But I just don't know if the Green Bay Packers will make the playoffs this year. They won't be as awful as Chicago or other teams, but they'll just probably be middle of the pack and be picking in the middle of the first round as far as where they'll be in the 2024 draft. I just don't see them being a playoff team. But yeah, give me the Steelers to win today's football game here. Looking at the rest of the schedule here, let's take a look at the next game we're going to talk about here. Another game scheduled here on the afternoon slate. The Tennessee Titans are at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That game is going to be taking place here at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa. This team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they've lost their last few games. And Tennessee, they're looking for a win in the worst way as well. So, excuse me. So, with this game here, it's kind of, I look at this game, a game like this as a pick 'em. Games like this where each team is struggling, one of these teams needs a win. One team is just going to be more desperate than the other. The Titans are favored by, or actually, I'm sorry, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are favored by 2.5. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're at home. And Tennessee, 10 days ago, they got beat as well on Monday Night Football by Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh, they're not a great team, but they had a defense that was stingy. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers don't have a great defense. Their defense is kind of struggling in spots. And Will Levis, he throws the football. That's what I've seen from him so far. They're going forward with Levis as their quarterback. Ryan Tannehill is not active. So if there's a situation where Will Levis is playing and he ends up getting injured or something, their backup is actually going to be Malik Willis, the quarterback out of Liberty. He's a second-year quarterback, so he's a young quarterback as well. For me, I could see the Tennessee Titans actually taking this game by a field goal over Tampa Bay. Each team is 3-5, and Tampa Bay is 1-3 at home. So they haven't defended home really well. Their only win at home was over the Chicago Bears way back in like week 2. But that's the Chicago Bears. That doesn't prove anything to me. The Titans on the flip side, they're 0-4 on the road, and they're 3-2 at home. Or, I'm sorry, 3-1 at home. Excuse me. So they could use a win on the road. They could use a win on the road to kind of let people know that they're not that bad away from home. So I'm actually going to take the Titans to win this one close. If Tampa Bay wins this one, it'll be because the offense played really well for Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield has looked very pedestrian over the last few weeks, and he's looking a lot like the quarterback that was gotten rid of by a few teams. So for me, I'm going to take Tennessee to win this one close. Will Levis needs to get the ball definitely to DeAndre Hopkins. They definitely had a pretty solid connection last week, even though they lost the game. And they actually looked pretty good against Atlanta, too, with that victory that they got a couple of weeks ago. So if Levis can get the ball to Hopkins and you can get Derrick Henry going, I could see this game being in Tennessee's favor, because with Derrick Henry, their running game is better than Tampa's. Rachaad White is decent. With Leonard Fournette over the past few years, he was their lead back, and he's currently a free agent. He's not with anybody right now. But Rachaad White is decent. He's not a guy that scares me when I hear his name. So give me the Tennessee Titans actually to win this football game here, even though Tampa's favorite. The Titans are then at Jacksonville. They'll be in a different part of Florida next week, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They're home against the Carolina Panthers November 26, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. And then home again against the Indianapolis Colts in the divisional matchup December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They then travel to Miami December 11th for Monday Night Football, December the 11th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. So the Tennessee Titans today, I'm actually taking them to win over Tampa, even though they're not favored. Jacksonville is going to be interesting because that's a divisional matchup, and they already got had the loss. I'm sorry, they haven't played them yet. They actually will be their first matchup with them, and then they play them to end the year in January. So I'm going to keep an eye on that game here. Tennessee at Jacksonville is going to be interesting because divisional matchups typically are, and Jacksonville is the better team in that division right now. So I'm curious to see how Jacksonville looks against San Francisco, but I'm going to take Jacksonville to win that game. So for me, Tennessee, they'll beat Carolina for sure. Then they have that matchup with Indianapolis that I feel like will be tough because, again, that's a divisional matchup as well. So Tennessee will probably go 2-3 over the next 5 weeks. They want to go 3-2 because with any division, you want to win your divisional matchups. You want to take those because that helps you solidify where you sit amongst the groups around you or the teams around you and where you sit in the conference. Because the AFC South is probably only going to get one playoff team. That'll probably be the division winner, obviously. So if they're the Tennessee Titans, you want to win some games here. You're sitting at the bottom. If you can go 3-2 over the next 5 weeks, depending on what the other teams in your division do, that'll be great for you. But give me the Tennessee Titans to win the game here today. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I've spoken about this division here. The only team that's out of it in the NFC South to me is the Carolina Panthers at 1-8. Tampa, even though I'm picking Tennessee to win this game, with them losing 4 in a row, they need this win today. They need to win this game today because their next 2 weeks, they're at the San Francisco 49ers, 4:05 p.m. Eastern, November 19th on Fox. Then they're at the Indianapolis Colts, November 26th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. You then host the Carolina Panthers, December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before traveling to Atlanta to face the Falcons, December 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they got to start winning some games here. If they can get a win today over Tennessee, that would be ideal because I don't see them traveling out west to beat the 49ers. I don't see that happening. The 49ers have lost their last few games in a row, and they need to get it together for sure, but I don't see them beating the 49ers that following week here. Indianapolis is going to be interesting because they'll be at the Colts, but that's a dome game, so I don't think weather is going to be a factor at all, obviously. And plus, they're not traveling quite as far as the time zones. They're all both on the Eastern time zone, so that won't be an issue either. So I could see them taking the Indianapolis Colts game. The Colts won today because the Patriots aren't good, and the Patriots can't really generate anything on offense when they need to. So that's why I would say they could get in there and possibly beat the Colts. Looking over the course of the 5 weeks, though, with Carolina and Atlanta, I would love to say that they're just going to beat Carolina because it'll be their first meeting of the season against Carolina. But Carolina might steal a couple games here, even though they're not going to be the best team by any means in that division. They'll probably be one of the worst teams in football record-wise. But, with divisional matchups here, any given Sunday, things could happen. Over the next 5 weeks with Tampa Bay, it's hard to see where the wins come from because Carolina and Atlanta to start the December, that's four of your final 6 games are divisional for your Tampa Bay. So those games are as crucial as they come. I would say 2-3 over the next 5 weeks. Even 1-4 is in the cards. 1-4 is in the cards if you're Tampa Bay because you've lost 4 in a row now. You haven't won since basically early October. So this team really needs to get it together and they need to do it soon. Going back to the rest of the schedule here, let's take a look here. The next game we're going to talk about here is also part of the afternoon slate. I touched on this a little bit. The San Francisco 49ers are returning off of their bye week, and they'll be at the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are also returning off of a bye week as well. The 49ers have lost 3 straight games heading into their bye week, so they definitely want to get it back going and get themselves going again. The Jaguars are definitely streaking, but with the 49ers adding Chase Young at the trade deadline, that's going to help the pass rush here. So Jacksonville, they're definitely going to want to keep that pass rush at bay to give Trevor Lawrence the time to do what he needs to do. And on the flip side, for the San Francisco 49ers, you got to get that offense cracking again. You got to get things going through McCaffrey, and that'll open up the pass and make things easier for Brock Purdy. I never believed that Brock Purdy was an elite quarterback. I just believe that he was performing well under the system and doing his job with what he was given. You know what I mean? That's kind of how Jimmy Garoppolo was. He's not an elite quarterback either. You saw just in that little bit of time with the Raiders, he's not the guy. So for me, Brock Purdy, he's still a rookie to me. This is his second season, but he hasn't played much football between this season and last season. He hasn't played a full season yet. So there's still stuff I'm going to be waiting on from Brock Purdy. But if you can get this offense going through Christian McCaffrey, that's really going to make things happen for them. And also, they're getting Deebo Samuel back. Deebo Samuel missed a couple of games prior to the bye week with a hairline fracture in his shoulder. So they're getting Deebo back. That's going to help too. So I'm actually going to take the 49ers to win this football game. They're favored by 3. And that sounds about right based on how Jacksonville is as well. Jacksonville is a pretty solid football team, and coming off of a bye week, they're going to be fresh as well. They won their last 5 games in a row, and they did it in 2 different countries. With beating in Atlanta and Buffalo early in England, early in or October. Those games were in England. You were home against Indianapolis. You had to travel to the Saints. You had to travel to Pittsburgh. So they've traveled to different places and they've gotten wins here. So me personally, I think the 49ers were bad because of the guys that they were missing more so than their play. Brock Purdy did turn the ball over and he was pretty pedestrian in the games that he had here. But I honestly think that with the guys the Niners are getting back, that they're going to win this football game today. So I'm going to take the Niners to win this football game. And looking ahead to their schedule here, the Niners, to me, they'll be in great shape because they'll have Tampa Bay next week at home, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox. I've already taken them to win that football game. They do have to travel to Seattle on Thanksgiving, 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC that following Thursday for a football game. That's going to be tough. And they also have to travel to see the Philadelphia Eagles December 3rd, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox in an NFC Championship matchup. They are then home against the Seattle Seahawks again for December 10th matchup, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So they see the Seattle Seahawks twice within a couple of weeks, about 14 days, about 17 days or so. The San Francisco 49ers here, they've lost 3 straight prior to the bye week. I think they get the win against Jacksonville and against Tampa. Seattle is going to be tough. They could probably split with Seattle, but at Philadelphia, that's going to be a true test. That's going to be a true test. If you can go to see Philadelphia and get a win against them, where Miami was unable to do it, the Dallas Cowboys, they were unable to do it. If you can go to Philadelphia and get a victory, that'll kind of prove that you're back in the mix, because prior to those losses that they had, people were saying San Francisco was the best team in football. And I was kind of on that bandwagon. But these last few weeks here, they just haven't looked like that team. So I'm going to take San Francisco to win today. But Jacksonville, they're not a slouch by any means. And again, they've won their last 5 games in a row. After today, the Jacksonville Jaguars host the Tennessee Titans November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before traveling to Houston to face the Texans. That'll be 1 p.m. Eastern, November 26th on CBS. Again, they host the Cincinnati Bengals for Monday Night Football, December the 4th on ABC, 8:15 p.m. Eastern, before traveling to the Cleveland Browns December 10th. That game will take place 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So, including today, I got the Jacksonville Jaguars here. They're going to be probably 3-2 because I got them beating Tennessee next week. I'm going to make that prediction officially next week, but I could see them beating Tennessee and beating Houston. Cincinnati and Cleveland is going to be interesting. That Cincinnati Monday Night Football game is going to be huge. Jacksonville and Cincinnati, because those are going to be the type of games that determine where you're going to be in the playoffs if you make it. Those type of games matter as far as tiebreakers and whatnot towards the end of the year. So Cincinnati, that's going to be an interesting game. And then at Cleveland 6 days later is going to be tough because you're facing a tough defense. You're facing a tough Cincinnati defense or Cleveland defense. That's one of the top 3 defenses in all of football. So Jacksonville, I know they've won their last 5 in a row, but things are going to get tough starting with today's game against San Francisco. So we're going to be taking things week by week, but things are going to get very tough for Jacksonville. If they can weather this storm the next 5 games and get 4 victories, 3-4 victories, then they're legit. Then they're legit for real. Jacksonville's legit. The last 1 p.m. Eastern game we're going to talk about here before we head to the afternoon slate, the Cleveland Browns are traveling to visit the Baltimore Ravens at M&T Bank Stadium in Landover, Maryland. That game is going to be very slugfest. It's going to be very much a slugfest here because, again, that's a divisional matchup. And the Ravens, they're sitting at the top, and they want to hold on to that, plain and simple. They definitely want to keep that. But Cleveland Brown, they're one of those 5-3 teams. They want to separate themselves from Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, so they're going to have something to say about that here. Baltimore dominated last week. They absolutely dominated the Seattle Seahawks. And for me, it's not a fluke that they dominate NFC teams. They dominate NFC teams, and the last 3 teams that they've played have been NFC teams, actually. So getting back to the AFC is going to be very familiar territory for Lamar Jackson. NFC teams don't really study AFC teams the same way. So I feel like that's a part of what kept Lamar Jackson very, very dominant against these teams. So as far as today, though, getting back to divisional matchups, not only does Baltimore have Cleveland today, but they host the Cincinnati Bengals Thursday night, November 16th for Thursday Night Football at 8:15 p.m. Eastern, taking place on Amazon Prime. So that's going to be huge. Me personally, I'm going to take Baltimore to win today by a touchdown. But Cleveland is going to make things very difficult on Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson has had some games where he scores 4 touchdowns, and he's had some games where he doesn't score any. That's the type of games you get depending on who Lamar Jackson is playing against sometimes. But give me Baltimore to win this game today, and I say they win this game by a touchdown. They're really going to need the running game to be a part of this, and that also includes Lamar Jackson, obviously, because of how dynamic he is. As I said, after today, they host the Cincinnati Bengals for Thursday Night Football. They're at the Los Angeles Chargers. That'll be November 26, 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. Baltimore then has a bye week after that. They're home against the Los Angeles Rams December 10th that following week at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Then they're at the Jacksonville Jaguars for Sunday Night Football December 17th, 8:20 Eastern on NBC. So that's going to be an interesting game as well. Jacksonville's got some tough games coming up here with Cincinnati and with Baltimore. So that'll really prove what Jacksonville is, as I stated. But with getting back to the Baltimore Ravens here today, I got them winning against Cleveland today. And with Cincinnati, I'll give you an official prediction on Thursday, this coming Thursday, as to who I got winning that football game, because I'm going to be watching Cincinnati and seeing what they do as well. They looked really good against Buffalo last week, but I definitely want to see some more from them. But the Baltimore Ravens, looking at this schedule, I got them beating the Chargers and the Rams as well. So they, at worst, will be 3-2 in my opinion over the next 5 weeks. With Cincinnati and Jacksonville, those are going to be the games that are going to be tough for them as well. Cleveland is not going to be easy today, but I still got them winning this football game as far as an official prediction. And looking at their games again, they're going to be 3-2 at worst over the next 5 weeks. Having 2 AFC North matchups in the same week is going to beat you up. But 10 days before they face the Chargers, that'll be enough time for them to get that victory. Hopefully they don't get any injuries out of this game because, again, those tougher games where you're hosting AFC North teams, those teams are going to beat you up. So the key for them is to get out of this game not only with victories, but to get out unscathed. So give me the Baltimore Ravens to win today against the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns, on the flip side here, after today's game here, they're scheduled, they're home against the Pittsburgh Steelers next Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before traveling to Denver November 26th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They then travel to the Los Angeles Rams December 3rd, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox before hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars December 10th at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. The Cleveland Browns, to me, their defense, like I said, is top 3 in the league, but they need to get that offense going. They were able to get a victory over Arizona last week, but the Arizona Cardinals, they were using a rookie in Clayton Tune. I expected Cleveland to get that win, especially with that defense doing what they're doing. Today is really going to show me what they are at Baltimore. That's a true test. And then home against the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's another test that's going to truly show who they are, because this will be their second clash here. They lost week 2, 26-22 at Pittsburgh. So with them hosting Pittsburgh, I think they'll get that win, honestly. I think Pittsburgh and Cleveland split. So after losing the ball, I got them losing to Baltimore today, but they'll beat Pittsburgh, and I think they can come in and beat Denver if that defense harasses Russell Wilson enough. So over the course of the 5-week periods that the Cleveland Browns have coming, I think they can be 3-2 as well. With the wins over Denver and the Los Angeles Rams, those 3 wins will keep them in the mix in the division after Baltimore today. I got them winning 3 in a row, but like I said, things happen week to week, but I can see them winning the next 3 games after today, the Cleveland Browns. If Watson can come back and be anything like he was, that'll help, but who knows? Deshaun Watson hasn't been that guy in a couple of years now, so who's to say? But give me the Cleveland Browns here with the next 5 weeks to be 3-2 with those next 5 games they got. The next couple of games we're going to talk about, these games are for the afternoon slate. The next 2 games we're going to talk about are taking place at 4:05 p.m. Eastern. The Atlanta Falcons are at the Arizona Cardinals. That game is taking place at State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. For me, that game is kind of a game with two teams that are similar. Atlanta is slightly better than the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals are getting James Conner back from injured reserve. He had an ankle injury and was out the last few weeks, so he'll be back for them. Atlanta is favored by 2.5 because the Cardinals, like I said, they're a bad football team. Cardinals are getting Kyler Murray back as well. He's going to be expected to return, and he hadn't played since 11 months ago, since he had torn that ACL. So with the Cardinals getting Kyler Murray back, I don't know how he'll look. He's going to be the third quarterback that the Cardinals have started this year. And on the flip side, James Conner is definitely going to improve that running game for the Arizona Cardinals. So Atlanta is favored, but if Arizona finds a way to take this game, I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked by that at all because Arizona, they showed some fight in a lot of games. They just weren't as good of a team as the other team, and so they weren't able to come away with the victory. The Atlanta Falcons aren't outright better than this team to me in any kind of way. Bijan Robinson is a great player, but the last couple weeks he hasn't been that good for them. And remember, the Atlanta Falcons, they benched Desmond Ridder to bring in Taylor Heineke at quarterback. So this game, it feels more like a pick'em than Atlanta being favored by 2.5. When a team is favored by 3 points or less, that's going to be a game that you want to possibly stay away from because neither team is really favored, in my opinion. Again, I'm not a betting guy, but I wouldn't be surprised if Arizona took this game today. I really wouldn't. With Kyler Murray coming back into the fold, and with you having James Conner in the backfield, you're getting a couple of pieces back that are going to make the team better. Clayton Tune isn't it at quarterback, and he belongs as a backup. I'm just going to put that out there. He deserves to be a backup, so that's where he's going to be for this team. Desmond Ridder also is a backup because of the way he's played. He leads the league in turnovers, so that's why they're bringing in Taylor Heineke, and I think that's a large part of the reason why people are taking the Atlanta Falcons. I'm going to stick with Atlanta just because of the fact that they got more consistency on their football team, and I can expect Bijan Robinson to have a better game. They are getting Drake London back as well. Drake London was out last week with the groin injury, but Atlanta's getting him back this week. I'll take those Atlanta and those points just because of the consistency they got. But if Arizona finds a way to win this game with them getting Connor back and with them getting Kyler Murray back, that'll be interesting to me. That'd be very interesting. Amari Mercado, Dave Mercado, excuse me. He was the running back that kind of took over when they lost when they lost James Conner to injury. He kind of took over for them. He's going to be out for this game, and with them getting James Conner back, he's definitely making the start. The Falcons have lost 3 of their last 5 games, and the Cardinals have lost 5 in a row. And I'm going to say it goes to 6 in a row. I'm going to actually take the Atlanta Falcons, but keep an eye on the Arizona Cardinals with the players that they get back today. Will Kyler Murray and James Conner make a difference? We'll have to see. The Falcons are home against the Saints next week, November 26th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox before traveling to visit the New York Jets December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox as well. They then host the Tampa Bay Buccaneers December 10th. That game will be at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. And they're then at the Carolina Panthers December 17th, but the time and network are to be determined. They're not sure about that yet, but December 17th, they'll be at the Carolina Panthers. The Falcons, like I said, I'm going to take them to win this game here today closely. And after that, things kind of get mixed up. The next week against the Saints, they're hosting the Saints, but that's a divisional matchup, so things can happen there. And then at the Jets, I'm not going to outright take them to beat the Jets quite yet. I'm going to need to see a few more games from the Jets here. After this week, the Falcons are actually on a bye week, so they play the Saints in 2 weeks from today. So that bye week will help them before they host the Saints as far as that divisional matchup before traveling to the Jets. And I can see Atlanta actually beating Carolina in mid-December. I'm going to wait to make an actual prediction on that one, but I can see them beating Carolina. So as far as this team, the Atlanta Falcons, they could possibly be 2-3 over the next 5 weeks. 2-3, 3-2. They'll hover around that. They've lost some games in a row, so they got to prove that they're worth that. But based on my prediction, I could see them winning some games here. But I'm going to take them actually to win at Arizona today. And we'll just have to see how that game shakes out this afternoon here before they head into their bye week next week. The Arizona Cardinals, on the flip side, again, they're going to be picking at the top of the draft, but I'm going to have my eye on how Kyler Murray looks, and I'm going to have my eye on how James Conner looks, because if those two guys can show that they can play, then you're going to probably be picking at other positions. Michael Wilson, the wide receiver that they took in the third round out of Stanford, he's had a pretty solid connection with Dobbs. So I'm going to be curious to see if he has any kind of connection with Murray at all. And then you still have Hollywood Brown as your wide receiver as well. So the Cardinals got pieces here and there. They got a couple of players, but it remains to be seen what they're going to be after this season. They're not going to be in the mix for anything. Like I said, at 1-8, you're not in the mix for anything. You're in the same position as Carolina basically right now. They're at the Houston Texans November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS before hosting the Los Angeles Rams November 26th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They're at the Pittsburgh Steelers December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They then have a bye week after that before they host the San Francisco 49ers December 17th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So the Arizona Cardinals, I don't even have them beating Houston next week at Houston. Houston, like I said, they've proved to be a scrappy team, and they're in the mix possibly for a possible wild card in the AFC. There's no such thing to speak about for the Cardinals, and I can see them possibly being at best 1-4. They may even lose to the Rams in a couple weeks. So, like I said, the Cardinals are going to be picking at or near the top of the NFL draft. The next game we're also going to talk about at 4:05 p.m. Eastern is the Detroit Lions traveling to face the Los Angeles Cardinals. I'm sorry, the Los Angeles Chargers. Sorry, I was looking at the Cardinals score. Sorry about that. They're traveling to visit the Los Angeles Chargers. Detroit is coming off of a bye week last week. The Chargers last week, they're looking at their schedule here. They're one of those teams to me, even though they beat up on the Jets last week for Monday Night Football, they still got to prove some things to me here, and this is the game to do that. Hosting the Detroit Lions in an afternoon matchup, the Lions are traveling out west, so that can be difficult for teams when you're traveling out west or when you're a team out west traveling east. Those time zone changes can mess with you, but I feel like traveling west is easier because it's an earlier time, but you're more awake. Whereas if you're traveling west to east, it could be 10 a.m. in LA, but in New York, it's 1 o'clock. So your body is thrown off by 3 hours. And in my experience, it's easier to fall back when it comes to daylight savings time ending. It's easier to fall back an hour than to go up an hour for me personally as I get older. My body just doesn't really like that. When I was a kid, I didn't notice those things. So with all that being said, the Lions traveling to visit the Chargers after traveling to visit Baltimore, I'm still going to take the Lions. The Chargers, to me, still got some work to do because, as I touched on already, they've been extremely inconsistent. They've actually epitomized inconsistency. They lost their first 2 games, then they won 2. They lost 2 games coming off of a bye week, then they won their last 2 against the Bears and the Jets. But notice those teams who I said, the Bears and the Jets, those are teams that are towards the bottom of the league. The Jets, they're very average, just like the Chargers are, but I still look at them as trending down as far as what they are. And then the Bears, as I touched on, they're going to be in the top 5 picking in the draft. They may have 2 picks in the top 5, depending on what Carolina does. So the Chargers and Lions, I'm going to take the Lions to win this football game here. The Chargers will put up a couple of touchdowns because they got guys. They got Austin Eckler out there, and he's very capable. He's had a rough start this year, but I think a lot of that has to do with the ankle being bad to start the year. He missed a handful of games. So I think the Chargers, they lose to the Lions today. And at Green Bay next week, that game I can see them winning because they have the better offense, even though they're going to be out on the road at Green Bay and they'll be outside for that game. I can still see them taking that game. So give me the Lions to win today, but the Chargers win next week at Green Bay. They'll be hosting the Baltimore Ravens for Sunday Night Football, November 26th on NBC. They're at New England December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. That team is a mess, and I got the Chargers winning that one, even though that one's about a month away, literally a few weeks away. I'll say the Chargers win that one, but we'll have an official prediction when that time comes. And the Chargers actually will then host the Denver Broncos in their first of 2 matchups, December 10th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So the Los Angeles Chargers, they've won their last couple of games, but they've never won more than 2 games in a row. They've never lost more than 2 in a row, but they never won more than 2 in a row. And at 4-4, It's almost like you're wiping the slate clean, and with these next 9 games, you got to prove who you really are. Again, I'm taking Detroit to win today, but if they can show any kind of fight and get a win next week against Green Bay, that'll keep them in the mix, and that would put them actually at 5-5. So the Chargers, they got to show some consistency here, and if Brandon Staley doesn't do that, or if they don't leap out to an amazing winning streak of any kind, I can still see him losing his job. So give me the Lions to win this football game here today. Looking at the Lions schedule, again, they're coming off of a bye week. They just had their bye week in week 9, so they have 8 games left here, including today. They'll be home for the next couple games after today. They'll be hosting the Chicago Bears on 1 p.m. Eastern, November 19th on Fox. And as I said on Thursday, they'll be hosting the Packers November 23rd on Fox. That's at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. That's the first game of the Thanksgiving slate. They're then on the road for the New Orleans Saints December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox. And they're at the Chicago Bears December 10th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox as well. So 3 of their next 5 games are on the road. But again, I'm taking them to beat the Chargers today. And I'll take them to beat the Bears next week. So I could see the Lions going at worst 3-2 over the next 5 weeks. At worst. If they go 4-1, even 5-0, that'll be excellent. But this is football and things happen from week to week. So it's really hard to prognosticate that far out. But I could see the Lions being at worst 3-2 over the next 5 weeks. The next game we're going to talk about here, these next 2 games are taking place at 4:25 p.m. Eastern. This game here is going to be an NFC East matchup here with the Dallas Cowboys hosting the New York Giants. That game taking place at AT&T Stadium. Really not much to speak about on this game at all, so we're going to be brief on this one. I'm taking the Cowboys to win this one. They're favored by, get this, 17.5. That's crazy. That means if they win by 18 points or more, then you hit your parlay. I'm not a betting man. I'm slowly starting to learn what a lot of this means as far as the over/under, the who's favored, who's going to do what. I've never been a betting guy, so I don't like wasting money like that. But I could see the Cowboys winning by 18 or more points. This Giants team is starting Tommy DeVito at quarterback, as I touched on earlier in the broadcast. Daniel Jones is out for the season with a torn ACL, and Tyrod Taylor is going to miss the next few games because he's listed on IR with rib issues. So Tommy DeVito is going to be your starting quarterback going toe-to-toe with Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott has 13 touchdowns to 5 interceptions on the season, and I see him adding to that total today. The Cowboys did lose 28-23 last week to the Philadelphia Eagles and Philly. But one thing I've noticed about the Cowboys is when they do lose a big game like that, they like to bounce back. When they lost to the 49ers back in at San Francisco back on October 8th, they went to LA and took care of the Chargers before heading into their bye week. And then they came and beat down the Los Angeles Rams, So I could see the Cowboys winning big today. The Giants, like I said, you're not going to have Daniel Jones anymore for the rest of the season. And they're going to have trouble at the quarterback position. You're going to need Saquon Barkley to run for like 150 yards. But if it's a situation where Saquon Barkley has to do everything, that's going to make things tough on him because they know they're not going to be able to get the ball down the field. So, yeah, today's going to be a rough day for the Giants. After the Dallas Cowboys win today, they'll be at Carolina, 1 p.m. Eastern, November 19th. Before hosting the Washington Commanders on Thanksgiving. That game takes place 4:30 Eastern on Thanksgiving Day. That'll be the middle part of the lineup. There's 3 games on Thanksgiving. They have Thursday Night Football a week later against the Seattle Seahawks. That game is taking place November 30th at 8:15 p.m. Eastern. Then 10 days later, they host the Philadelphia Eagles for Sunday Night Football, December 10th, 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. And they then travel to Buffalo to take on the Bills, 4:25 p.m. Eastern, December 17th. So the Dallas Cowboys, after today and after they're at Carolina next week, that's when the schedule gets real, in my opinion. So I'm going to take Dallas to win their next 2 games because, like I said, they got the Giants and the Panthers. Those are bad teams. Those teams are a combined 3-15. You better win those games. The short turnaround for the Commanders on Thursday, on Thanksgiving the 23rd, about 10 days, 11 days away, that might be tricky because it's a divisional matchup and it's on Thanksgiving. So that's a Thursday day game. It's not even a Thursday night game. So that's a quick turnaround for the Cowboys. You're then hosting the Seahawks, and then you're hosting the Panthers or the Eagles 10 days later after that. Those two games are also going to be tough. So if you're the Dallas Cowboys, based on the way the schedule looks, you can't go 2-3. Because if you win your next two games, but then turn around and lose to Washington, Seattle, and Philly, you're going to kind of be back in the same spot you're in now. You'll only be 7-6. So they need to beat the Commanders and they need to beat the Eagles. The Seattle Seahawks game is less inconsequential unless it comes down to a tiebreaker for a wild card spot. But you need to beat Washington and Philly if you're the Dallas Cowboys. So theoretically, they should go 3-2 based on what I see, but they need to go 4-1. If they can go 5-0, that'll be ideal, but that's very pie in the sky thinking. They need to go 4-1, 3-2. 3-2 is fair. That's not really enough to me because if you go 3-2, you'll be 8-5. 8-5 is all right if you're trying to keep pace with Philly, if you're trying to keep pace with anybody in the NFC. But they need to go 4-1 if you're the Dallas Cowboys. I can't emphasize that enough. So for Dallas, I got them winning today by a lot over the Giants. The next game we're going to talk about here, taking place at 4:25 p.m. Eastern, is the Washington Commanders traveling to visit the Seattle Seahawks. That game is taking place at Lumen Field. That game is going to be interesting because, again, traveling east to west, that's easier than traveling west to east in my experience. So for me, that game is going to be interesting. The Commanders and Seahawks. The Seahawks are favored by 6 points. And at 5-3, they're trying to keep pace in that division with the San Francisco 49ers here. The 49ers are also sitting at 5-3 as well. The Seahawks kind of blew it because with the 49ers having a bye week, Seattle briefly sat in the lead in that division. But unfortunately, they got blown out by Baltimore, so that put them right back in a tie with San Francisco. So the Seahawks are 3-2 in their last 5 games. The Commanders 2-3 in their last 5 games, with the win over New England last week for Washington. The win last week didn't prove anything because everybody beats New England as proven this year. So I'm going to take Seattle by a touchdown here. They need to rebound from that loss to the Baltimore Ravens. And with Washington traveling, I think that may affect them a little bit. And I think their defense can get a couple of turnovers off of that offense, notably Sam Howell. Sam Howell has 14 touchdowns, but he also has 9 interceptions and he's fumbled the ball a couple of times. So if you're Seattle, if you can get that defense playing any kind of way and get any contribution from Geno Smith, that'll be the key for Seattle winning this football game. So I am going to take Seattle to win by about a touchdown over Washington today. And looking forward to their schedule. They're at the Los Angeles Rams next week at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS before hosting the San Francisco 49ers on Thanksgiving. That's the night Thanksgiving game. That'll be at 8:20 p.m. Eastern on NBC. They have a Thursday night football matchup that I just touched on at Dallas following Thursday, November 30th. Then 10 days later, they're at the San Francisco 49ers, 4:05 p.m. Eastern, December 10th. So after today, after today and after playing the Rams next week, things are going to get real for them, before they close out against Arizona. They got some tough games down the stretch here, Seattle does. And today's game, they shouldn't really take lightly. I'm not expecting them to blow out Washington. I'm just taking the points, as they say. So I expect them to win by about a touchdown. And at the Rams took that game from them at home, but I think they'll take it back, and I think they'll split the season series next week. So I'm going to take Seattle to win the next couple games, but that San Francisco, Dallas, San Francisco stretch that I've talked about before is going to be really tough. And they may end up coming out of that possibly 0-3, 1-2. So if Seattle can win 4 of their next 5 games, they'll be in the mix for sure, and I'll honestly consider them a pretty serious team in the division because at that point, they'll be in the mix with San Francisco for the division and not just a wild card spot. If they lose both of those games to San Francisco, it won't matter. It just won't matter. Even if you get Washington and if you get the Rams, if you win those next 2 games, if you turn around and lose in San Francisco, Dallas, San Francisco, you're going to be at best a 3rd seed even if you win the rest of the games because you have Philly coming up in mid-December after that stretch. So the Seattle Seahawks, they got a really tough sled after the next couple of games here today. On the flip side for Washington, if they want to keep pace in their division, the only team that's really out of it in that division, like I said, is the New York Football Giants. They're a bad team and they're not going anywhere. They're hosting that Giants team next week, and they'll get that win November 19th, 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox before traveling to Dallas for Thanksgiving. They host the Miami Dolphins December 3rd, 10 days later at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fox before they get their bye week. They have a late bye week. They're then at the Los Angeles Rams December 17th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So with the Washington Commanders, it's kind of a mixed bag here. They'll beat the Giants for sure, but with Dallas and Miami, those games are going to be tough. Those games are going to be tough for sure because you're not going to have the same pass rush that you had when you trade Montez Sweat and you trade Chase Young in separate trades and separate deals with the Bears and Niners respectively. That pass rush is not going to be the same. So that's part of the reason why I have the trepidation of them losing today and losing to Seattle. So I think Washington will probably be 2-3 at best over their next 5 games. I'm really not sure what they're trying to do as far as their what they're doing for their future, because they could be a wild card team and they could fall out of it and kind of determine where their draft position is. So not sure what Washington is doing, but give me Seattle to win this game today, and Washington will be at, like I said, 2-3 over the next 5 weeks. The game we're going to talk next about is the Sunday night football matchup between the New York Jets and the Las Vegas Raiders. That game is taking place at 8:20 p.m. Eastern at Allegiant Field in Las Vegas, Nevada. The Raiders, they looked pretty good against against the Giants last week here, but that's the Giants. You know what I mean? Anybody's going to look good against the Giants. And the reason, I think a large part of that, the culture has changed with Josh McDaniels being fired, but the Giants are a tomato can. The Jets are a similar team. They're not as bad as the Giants, but coming in at 4-4, they have a slightly better record than the Raiders. The Jets are favored by 2, and like I said, any game that's favored within 3 points feels like a pick 'em. If the Raiders come out and have that game that they had against the Giants last week, it would be somewhat surprising because, again, the Jets have a little bit more as far as football on their team, as far as players. But like I said, this game feels like a pick 'em. Zach Wilson doesn't scare you. He's better than a Tommy DeVito, but at the same time, he doesn't scare you. If Aaron Rodgers, was playing in this game and was healthy, I would take the Jets outright to win this football game. But it's really hard for me to determine who's going to win this game. Interesting. I'm going to take the Raiders to win this football game today. The Jets are favored by 2, but again, that feels like a pick 'em. I'm going to take the Raiders to win this football game by a field goal. They beat up the Giants last week, but that's the Giants. The Jets were a little better, but I'm going to take the Raiders to win this football game today. The Jets are favored, but I'm going to take the Raiders in a slight upset. The Raiders are at the Miami Dolphins next week at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They won't win that game, however. I got the Dolphins winning that one. They're back home for their next 3 games. They're home against the Chiefs November 26th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS before heading into their bye week. They then host the Minnesota Vikings December 10th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on December 10th on Fox. Then for Thursday Night Football, they host the Los Angeles Chargers December 14th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern on Prime Video. If you live in those local markets, you can see the game on television. That's typically how they do it for those games, but you have to have Prime if you're outside of those local markets. With today's game, again, I'm going to take the Raiders to win by a field goal, and I simply am doing that because it's the Jets. I'm going to take them to win tonight for Sunday Night Football. I got them losing at Miami and home against Kansas City before their bye week. Minnesota is a toss-up because Justin Jefferson could be back for that game because that's 5 weeks away. And with Joshua Dobbs, again, he'll have absorbed more of the playbook. So I could see the Raiders losing that game, even though they're hosting the Vikings. And with the Chargers, that's a divisional matchup. Divisional matchups are always going to be tougher because there's all these divisions, as far as playing each other, they're going to know each other really well. So that Chargers game could be tough for them too. But give me the Raiders today, and on a week-by-week basis, we're going to have to see what they are. We're going to have to see if they fall back into their losing ways again and really see if McDaniels being out of there is a huge change for that team. Because if they start reeling off wins, it'll be a huge indictment on Josh McDaniels. And I honestly believe he doesn't deserve another job if that's the case. Because with the way things went in Denver and with you spurning the Colts a few years ago, I just don't think he deserves it. The last game we're going to touch on before we close out the broadcast here is the Monday Night Football matchup taking place tomorrow night, November 13th. That'll be the Denver Broncos coming off of their bye week, traveling to visit the Buffalo Bills. That game will be taking place on ABC and ESPN. And again, that game will be at 8:15 p.m. Eastern. So that's going to be an interesting game here for a couple of reasons. The Broncos, as I said earlier in the broadcast, they won a couple of games prior to their bye week against the Packers and Chiefs, respectively. And on the flip side, the Buffalo Bills, at 5-4, they got beat up by Cincinnati in Sunday Night Football last week. And prior to that here, the game that they had against Tampa Bay, even though they won in that Thursday Night Football matchup, they didn't look as good as it should have, because if you remember, Baker Mayfield had a chance at a Hail Mary at the end of the game, and the ball actually ended up hitting the ground. Nobody knocked it away or tried to catch it or anything, which I thought was strange. So they just haven't been that convincing. They beat Tampa Bay 24-18. Even the Sunday Night Football matchup against the Giants way back in October 15th, they only won that game 14-9. And Daniel Jones, if I remember correctly, was out with a neck injury prior to this torn ACL. So the Buffalo Bills, if they want to be talked about amongst the elite teams, they're going to have to start playing some more consistent football. But to me, they're just not one of those teams. Miami leads the division at 6-3. They're on a bye week this week. The Jets are 4-4, and as I just discussed, they play later on tonight. The New England Patriots fell to 2-8 with their loss to the Colts, and they have a bye week next week, so they won't be playing after today's loss. So Buffalo, they're in the driver's seat, but if you lose this football game and then the Jets turn around and somehow get a victory later on today, you're in trouble because you're already down on Miami, and Miami kicked your butt. Or no, I'm sorry, they kicked Miami's butt, but Miami's been the better team. So I just don't really know if Buffalo's that team yet. They should beat Denver, but Russell Wilson is quietly having a good year. A lot of blame was put in his direction, but he's a better quarterback than he was last year. You got to remember, Russell Wilson last season, if I remember correctly, he only had 16 touchdowns for all of 2022. At the midway point, Russell Wilson has 16 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. He had something like 10 interceptions at this point last season. So Russell Wilson is playing better, but the defense regressed. And in my opinion, Ejiro Evero was a better defensive coordinator than Vance Joseph. Vance Joseph's track record, he's never had a great defense at any point in his career with any team he's been with. The Cardinals, the Dolphins, the Broncos when he was coach prior. He's never had a great defense. So the Bills should win this football game, but I'm going to be keeping an eye on if the Bills can play a game to where they blow the Broncos out. And on the flip side, if the Broncos can get another win under their belt, and in my opinion, that'll kind of put them back in the mix as far as possibly a wild card. They're not going to win that division. The Chiefs got that, and they got that locked. But the Broncos, that'll raise some eyebrows here and kind of get them back in the swing of things at 4-5. When you start out 1-5 and you can get a few wins under your belt, that's key. I don't know if they'll win tomorrow night against the Bills. That's a tall task going to Buffalo, even off of a bye week, but it remains to be seen. The Bills are actually favored by, I believe, 5 points. Actually, 7 points. So that's a touchdown and an extra point. So that sounds about right. If the Bills win this game by a final of like 30-21, that wouldn't surprise me very much. So I'll take the Bills to win this football game. But what I'm going to be looking at is seeing if they can play some consistent football. That's what I'm going to be looking at for the Bills. They host the New York Jets in 6 days, November 19th on CBS at 4:25 p.m. Eastern. The Bills then have to travel to the Philadelphia Eagles November 26th at 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS before they head into their bye week. Then they're at the Kansas City Chiefs December 10th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Then they then host the Dallas Cowboys December 17th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So after the Broncos game tomorrow night, the Bills, they got some games here. The Jets are going to play them tough, and the Jets already beat them week 1. Even with losing Aaron Rodgers, the Jets already beat them because Josh Allen turned the ball over 4 times in that game, 3 interceptions and a fumble. So they're looking to get the split against the Jets in that game. And with them hosting the Jets, I think they can do it. But the Jets aren't going to roll over and play dead for them by any means because they didn't do already. They already took them out week 1. At Philly is going to be very tough. That's going to be a hostile environment for Josh Allen. They're going to be loud in Philly, loud and proud. They want those Eagles to fly. As the best team in football right now, the Eagles are looking to capitalize on that. When you beat teams like Buffalo, that adds to that. That's another feather in your cap, pun intended. The game after their bye week against Kansas City, December 10th, that's going to be huge because Buffalo over the years has not been able to beat Kansas City. They haven't really proven to be on Kansas City's level. It's been like this since 2020, basically. So if you're Buffalo, if you can get a win at Kansas City, that's fine. But we want to see that in the playoffs, and that hasn't been the case. The Dallas Cowboys, Buffalo and Dallas, that's going to be intriguing as well because on each side, each team needs that win. Dallas needs to prove that they can beat a contender, and Buffalo still qualifies as that, in my opinion. And on the flip side, Buffalo needs to prove that they can beat a contender as well, to me. And if you know the history of Buffalo and Dallas, it's not very good, especially when you talk about the Super Bowl. So, in my opinion, Buffalo, over these next 5 weeks, these games get tough after Denver. Even with Denver tomorrow night, I wouldn't sleep. You want to take them out and take them out early. But after that, with a divisional matchup against the Jets, a team you've already lost to, and then Philly, Kansas City, Dallas after that, we're just going to have to see week to week what Buffalo is. Ideally, they want to go 4-1 to not only keep pace with Miami, but to prove that you can beat contenders. Because as I said, after Denver, after Denver and the Jets, those other 3 teams are probably going to be playoff teams. Philly, Kansas City, and Dallas. Those are playoff teams. The Jets, it remains to be seen on what they can do, but Denver, they'll be in the top 10 in the draft, in the 2024 draft. They may win a couple more games, but I think Denver will still miss the playoffs. I said that they would probably be a contender if they can get a win, but I still don't see that. It'll just show that they've won some games. Stephon Diggs is going to play for the Broncos. He did have an injury designation for some reason a couple of days ago, but he is going to play. Micah Hyde, on the flip side, is going to be out for the Broncos. He's not going to play. Von Miller, the former Denver Bronco, who was taken in the first round back in 2011 for this team and spent 11 seasons with the Broncos, he's going to be the guy looking forward to playing them because he's still got a lot of love for the Broncos. You know, he still talks about them very fondly, and he'll always remember the Broncos as the best special place in his heart. He talked about the Rams a little bit, obviously, because he was traded from the Broncos to the Rams in the 2021 season, was able to get a Super Bowl out of the deal. So him getting his second ring, he has fond things to say about his former teams. And the Broncos, of course, drafting him, you know, his heart is still with the Broncos, so he's looking forward to that game. I honestly don't know how many snaps he'll get because he's been kind of stiff coming off of that ACL injury he suffered last year, but it'll be kind of interesting to see what he does for the Bills defense and all. But like I said, to sum it all up, I'm going to take the Bills to win this game by a touchdown. For the Denver Broncos on the flip side here, as I said, they'll be picking in the top 10 of the draft. I honestly think they just went down a bit as far as their draft picks in the draft with them winning a couple of games, but I still don't think they make the playoffs. It'll be nice for them to have a first-round pick considering they haven't had their last couple as a result of the Russell Wilson trade, but it'll be nice for them to have a first-round trade. The Broncos are hosting the Minnesota Vikings for Sunday Night Football in a week, November 19th on NBC. They'll host the Cleveland Browns the following November 26th at 4:05 p.m. Eastern on Fox. They then have to travel for their next couple games. They'll be at the Houston Texans December 3rd, 4:05 p.m. Eastern on CBS. They'll be at the Los Angeles Chargers December 10th, 4:25 p.m. Eastern, CBS at SoFi Stadium. So the Denver Broncos, to me, will probably go 1-4 over the next 5 games, in my opinion. It was nice to get a win over the Chiefs, but that just didn't really – the only thing that did was break a long losing streak if you're the Denver Broncos. It didn't do anything to solidify your place in the division because you're still behind everybody. You're behind even the Raiders. And then on the flip side here, as far as the conference, you're the last place team in the conference. They're last out of everybody, in my opinion. So the Broncos, even if they do get a couple wins, like I said, that's really just going to lower their position as far as where they are in the first round in the NFL draft. It doesn't do anything for them as a team. And the Broncos are probably already looking forward to next year. If they can get a win at Buffalo, I'll be astonished. I truly will. And that'll be a huge indictment more so on Buffalo than showing that the Broncos are a good team. So, like I said, that's going to be the last game we touch on for today. There are some games that have already started here. So depending on where you are in your local markets, here there are games taking place here. and depending on who you root for, you might want to check those out. If you have YouTube and you have the NFL Sunday Ticket, those games are already taking place, and that's where you want to go to check out scores and whatnot. But for me, I'm going to go ahead and close out this broadcast here. I'm going to have an update on all the scores for you that took place for today's results on Sunday and for the Monday Night Football results. And I'll also prognosticate what the game is going to look like for the Thursday Night Football matchup to start the week here for Week 11. And also, we'll go over the bye weeks and the teams are going to be out for Week 11 and not have any games. Thank you guys so much for joining me for another episode of The Hype Show. Be sure to subscribe to this channel if you're new to the channel. And if you're not new to the channel and you're joining me for another episode, I truly appreciate it, and I thank you so much here. I will be back on Tuesday afternoon. We typically start between 6:30 and 6:45 Eastern Time. We go about 90 minutes to talk about all the games here. But thank you again so much again for joining me for another episode of The Hype Show. Again, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so before. I am Big J all day, a.k.a. the Mighty Big J, and this is another episode of The Hype Show. Thank you so much, and you have a great rest of your day. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.